Hello, EDCI 702FZ Fayetteville cohort. Dr. Palermo with a week 10. Count them, 10 out of 15. Week 10 instructional video for you. APA tip of the week: don't start a sentence with a number, numeral at least. Write it out in full in APA style. Numbers are funky that way. Write out the numbers 1 to 10. Larger numbers can be listed, and percentages you want to have in a numeral form. But the thing that I see over and over is that folks start a sentence with a numeral. Don't do that. Okay, that's APA style. Your tip for the week. This week you are to read Fitzpatrick chapters 8 through 10. And those are some comparative approaches to program evaluation. You wrote about that last week, and there's a couple of other mentions in here. And a really good chart on page 249, 250, 251, that comparative analysis of those different approaches. Most of you identified in the discussion board that you posted last week that you wanted to do a program-oriented, that you identified with Tyler, and I kind of led you that way. But many of you said you're doing a program-oriented approach. Great. Most of you are actually doing a hybrid that's maybe program evaluation and maybe some decision-oriented, like the Stufflebean SIP stuff. You're trying to make a decision whether to continue or discontinue or alter, tweak the program that you're doing. So maybe you're doing a hybrid approach that has some objectives and some decision and maybe some participant approach. So chapter 8 in Fitzpatrick is talking about a participant approach. Many of you are describing programs that have student participants, perhaps teacher participants or adults, like administrator has input, or parents. Do involve those participants in the evaluation through surveys or interviews, focus groups, somehow. I would avoid using students at this point. If students are participants in a tutorial or a mentoring program, you would want their voice. If you were doing a dissertation here, we probably try to find out ways to hear their voice. In a short-term program evaluation, APA and your university's institutional review board, you don't want to go with kids. Children under the age of 18, asking them survey questions or involving them in a formal evaluation is difficult. You want to avoid it, and just don't use students as participants in your PE is my recommendation. I do want to come back and talk about the logic model. I have closed a couple of things here this week, and I want to show you that before I take them away in your view. But in chapters 8 through 10, no, you don't need to tell us again what approach you're using. I think most of you are using an objectives approach, and that works fine for me. The logic model. Okay, what I do want to say about the objectives approach is that are the objectives in your program laid out? Are they written? Are they in a teacher manual or a handout? Are they given to the students in a letter or to the parents if it's a tutorial program? Are the objectives laid out? Are they written for you? You might assume that everybody knows what the objectives of a tutorial program are. Don't assume. And I'll show you here in the logic model how to answer some questions very specifically about it, but don't assume that everybody knows the objectives of a program. And let me give you a non-school example. My son wanted a dog. My son is a big-hearted fella and wanted to provide a home for a rescue dog. So he went to the pound and he found out about a program that takes dogs that have been abused and abused by former owners or abandoned and finds a loving home for them. It's a program. It's a pet adoption program. Now my son has a bumper sticker on his car that says, "Who rescued whom?" One of the unintended outcomes of this pet adoption program is that my son is a much better person and better pet owner for having rescued this poor dog. That's not stated as one of the objectives of the pet adoption program. So it's not always really clear what the objectives of a program are, what the stated objectives are, and whether there are other unintended consequences of the program. So make sure that you know what it is that you are managing and that you're evaluating. Now let me show you the logic model example that's here. Okay, this is a really clear, it's a healthcare example, but it's a really clear example of a logic model and the questions that you can use to create your logic model. You must have a logic model in your PEA, and the logic model may or may not be your final program evaluation model. The logic model is a way to get you thinking about it and to lay out the if and then. If we do this stuff, then that stuff should happen kind of logic of it. But you may have a much more involved evaluation model. Start here, please. So you think about what resources are needed for a tutorial program and what specific activities are you doing? Who is tutoring when, how, why, how many days a week, how long does it go? Just describe the activities. In measurable objectives such that you can come back and ask the research questions to get answers to those questions. Who do you want to reach? So this is what you're doing, who you're doing, and then short, medium, and long-term outcomes. What do you expect to happen? To get here, ask these questions. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What specific activities? Remember that? Of these activities, who are we trying to reach? So these questions will help you fill in your logic model. In a logic model, it should work both ways. If we do this stuff, then these things should happen. These things happen because we did this stuff. And finally, after you answer the question satisfactorily in your mind, lay it out. And this is the kind of thing, similar or exactly the same, that I want to see in your discussion board laid out as a logic model for your program. I hope that's clear. This is a pretty clear example, I think. Okay, if all that clicking around worked, the logic model that I just showed you is here, and you can access that, hopefully download and copy and cut and paste and use the same chart, logic model table to load your logic model. Do it well. I'll give you some feedback, and then hopefully that's one that you can cut and paste right into your PEA. But work through that. I'm not going to ask you to respond about approaches, but again, please look at 249, 50, and 51 in Fitzpatrick. All five approaches are laid out. Expertise-oriented, consumer-oriented. I don't think you're doing one of those two. Program-oriented, which many of you said that you are doing. Decision-oriented, I think some of you are doing a hybrid program and decision. Or participant-oriented. And the participant-oriented is more like a case study. It's a deep dive. It's a that's your true qualitative research. But stay away from student participants. So that's chapters 7, 8, 9, 10 in Fitzpatrick for this week. You don't need to respond to that discussion board. I'm closing that one. And this final one about collaboration, I'm asking, instead of posting, bring something next week when we meet again to share with your colleagues. A real example of minutes, of an agenda, of photos from your leading collaboration with others. And again, incorporate that in OA, CNA, PEA that you're writing. I know I've forgotten something, but I've enjoyed reading your stuff so far. Keep it coming. We will meet again April 6th and 7th back in Fayetteville. Look forward to seeing you then. Thanks.